Hi, I'm Mike, and what you just heard was a jam I made on Gridstep, which is a polymorphic step sequencer for the Monome norns. Like the name implies, Gridstep requires the grid, and it's a step sequencer. It can sequence up to 16 tracks, and it uses the timbre engine, so each track can have a different sample that you can play across the isometric keyboard. When you start Gridstep, you'll be in this view. This is the isometric keyboard view, and if you play it, you'll hear some sounds. Now what you'll notice about the isomorphic keyboard view is that every note is perfectly in the scale you selected. The notes that are lit up are your root note. Right now you can see on the scale page that we are root note D and our scale is a harmonic minor. To play that scale, you start D and you can just keep playing up the keyboard. So it's quite nice if you start low. You can traverse the entire scale. Very nice. We switch to a different sound. I think this is a keyboard. So what's nice about the isomorphic view is you can make shapes, like this shape here. And when you make that shape, you get a chord. And something more like this, like a seventh chord. There's all sorts of cool shapes you can make, and it's very easy to come up with fun patterns just by messing around. This is also fun. Now there are two modes for the isomorphic keyboard. You can either be in scale mode, which we currently are, or if you press this button here, you get a chromatic keyboard view. In this view, the brightest lit keys are your root note, and these other lit keys are in the scale, and the keys that are not lit, well, they're the black keys. They're not in the scale. So if we go to a C major, see all the white keys are lit. And this is a little bit more tricky to play the scale up and down because you have to go sort of fully across by 6, and then once you get to the next octave, you keep moving. So it's a little bit more tricky to play up and down the scale in this mode. The chord shapes in this mode are also nice in that the same chord shape always gives you a similar thing. It's very easy to go between a major and a minor, and it will travel across you. So you can see the second interval has a minor chord when you play it. And that one's a major. So, besides the isomorphic keyboard, which I'm sure you'll have a lot of fun with, there are three different modes. So there is a pattern view. This is sort of like Ableton Live's clip launcher in that this row right here represents your tracks. So you have 16 different tracks. You can select which track is currently selected for your UI by just clicking on it. And you have patterns. And you just select a pattern to look at it. And then we'll start off in like this pattern. And if we click on this page, now we are in the step sequencer. Let's turn on the lights. The lights can be disabled right here. So you can view the full animation without having the scale root key helpers, which is quite nice, especially when you're playing back. And this button always toggles playback. Pause, pause. So these keys, your three modes: play, clip launch, sequence. You know, I see which one is active by which one is lit up. So I'll go to the step sequencer mode, and in this mode you can see that we have these steps right here, and also you'll notice the step length is not 16. So let's start on a fresh pattern. It'll be more fun. And I'll select an empty row here, so when I hit play, nothing else plays. What's a good instrument? This one? Alright, that one's good. So let's go to a new pattern here. And alright, so this is the step sequencer as you'll see it initially. You have 16 steps per bar, and you can have multiple bars. To get to the other bars, if you hold this button, this is the shift button, it temporarily pops up this view as you're holding it. And this is a very useful view as it'll let you do many different things. This top row here lets you mute steps. This row here lets you change the length of a bar. So 16 steps, 5 steps, 4 steps. Let's do 4 steps and do an arpeggio. So let's find some keys we like. Let's just do a major chord triad. So we're on step 1. You'll notice that's lit. That means that note's active. If I hit play, it keeps playing. Let's add more notes. Boom. Third step. And let's go up to the top one on this step here. Very easy. And I can make this longer. And what you can do is this is cut, copy, and paste, which are very useful for once you have some steps in there rearranging things. So let's start with cut. If I hold cut, you get a similar view with the shift, but instead of muting on this top row, you're actually going to cut this step. So I can cut this step and move it here. And you'll notice when you press cut, it will cut a step, and then when you press an empty step, it will paste it. So if I select this one So if I, cut this step and then select that one, it's actually going to cut this step instead and paste. So you can paste that back. The paste only works if the step is empty, otherwise it's going to cut this step. So play around with that a bit and get used to it. But once you got it, it's very useful. You can also, besides being in cut, copy, and paste, you can hold a step and then press another step, and it's gonna copy that step for you, which is very useful. I won't get too much into editing multiple bars, but I'll just show you when you want to expand your sequence and add more bars. These are your bars, so this is going to change how many bars are in your pattern. You can have up to 16 bars, pretty long. We'll keep it at like 2 for now. And you'll see when you have a bunch of bars, this row lets me select which bar is available for editing. So let's make it play this and then play this guy at the beginning of this bar, and we'll make that like a long note. So I'll hold copy and copy that step, switch to this bar. I'll hold paste and paste that step in. Now with this step selected, you may have noticed over here we have these random things, and the first one is your velocity, so you can easily change that per step. The second one is the note length, and if we go to here, the note length is 1 bar. This is like half a bar, etc. So let's make this go 1 bar, and we'll hit play. And I have a bunch of bars, so it didn't loop. So let's. Mutes are a very fun performance tool and composition tool, especially when you're sort of want to play around with what sounds good and don't want to be destructive and cut and lose your notes. In addition to editing the velocity and the note length here on the side, you can get into a velocity mode and a note edit mode by holding shift and then pressing either this key or this key. Now when you're in this mode, you can switch between velocity editing and note length editing. If you want to exit out of this, you press what normally would be the play button, but now it's the exit button, and it takes you back to the step sequencer. So again, shift this, I'm editing velocity, note lengths. Let's try that. Play. that's pretty straightforward, I think. Now, you should know how to play steps, edit steps, change the notes on the steps. I don't know if I showed you, but you can use these two buttons to go up and down. So if you want to reach higher notes, you can go really high. Usually you don't need to go too high. And your Y offset is actually stored per track. So if I change to a different track here, you'll see that the root notes are in a different place. That's just because I'm storing the Y offset per track, as some notes you want to play in a high range and other notes you want to play in a low range. Alright, so what next? So yeah, we can input notes, cut them, paste them, copy them, change their velocities, change their note length. Also really useful is these two buttons here. So this is just a quick way of jumping through a bar. So every time you press it, it will just advance to the next or the previous step, which is useful if you use sort of like one hand to sort of tap out a melody. I may eventually add sort of a step input record mode, so it auto advances for you, but until then, this is a good way to do it. Also, you can hold shift and press these buttons, and it shifts all the notes, and that shifts them per everything going on in your pattern based on how many bars you have. And yeah, I think if you change your bar length, like if I have a note here, right, and I change my bar length to be short and then long again, that note still exists, but if I have my bar length short and then I shift the notes based on how it works, it's gonna clear out any bars that aren't active. So just be aware of that. Wake up the screen. So yeah, shifting notes around, very useful. So in addition to that, you also have triggers. So if I hold a step, you can see this little trig page will pop up. You can also set the UI to always be on the trig page. But if you're not set to the trig page and you're on a different page and you hold this step, that guy's gonna pop up. So first thing we'll show off is this part, which you can change on the grid, which is the time offset. So if we do this here, let's do a short bar. Let's do that many steps. So yeah, this is basically your time offset. This is going to offset it by 1/32nd note, 1/64th. If you go into the UI, you can offset it even smaller, up to 1/128th T. You can also, here you can, if I go to this step time page, normally it's in sort of 16th mode, so 1 bar is 16 steps, but you can hit triplet mode, and now if you have 16 steps, it's actually going to be longer than a bar, and this essentially makes each step here a triplet note. So you're going to have a lot of fun with that, coming up with cool grooves. So in addition to the triplet mode, go back to our trigs, we have conditional triggering logic. So I'll just make the length 16 again. Also, I forgot to say, if you're in triplet mode and you do want equal to 1 bar, then make the length of your bar 12, and this whole thing will play back in 1 bar. Alright, so conditional logic, if you select your step and you're on condition and you scroll this way with encoder 3, you make a step trigger a random amount of time. Let's just change our bar length down to 5 as fun. In addition to percentage-based triggering, you can make, if you scroll past 100, you have pre, meaning if the previous trigger that was evaluated was true, that's going to trigger. You have not pre, so if the previous one was true, that step is not going to trigger. You have first, which means the first time a pattern plays, it will trigger. So let's make this first one a chord and set its condition to first. Now if I switch that pattern and come back, it played the chord, which is quite nice. So maybe this second step we want to always trigger on here, but not the first time. So we add a chord here. We'll make this be just the 7th note, why not? We'll keep it like that, and we'll offset it by 1 step, so it will actually play on this step, even though it's on this step. And the condition we will set to not first. And let's mute these steps so we can hear exactly what's going on. So we should get a chord. It will play. Also make this longer and mute everything. Alright. So the chord should play. Next bar, this should play. Cool. And that's going to continue playing until we reload that pattern by. In addition to pre, not pre first, and not first, you can also set things to 1 out of 2, 2 out of 2, 1 out of 3, 3 out of 3. And the second note number there is how many times the pattern has looped, not how many bars it is. So that could be slightly confusing at first, but it's pattern loops, not bars. So even if we have a long pattern, right, then if it's set to 1 out of 2, it's basically going to play the first time the pattern plays, not the second time, but then the clock's going to reset, and then the third time it will play. So yeah, let's keep those first 2 steps. We'll work on this step, mute everything else. And this guy will set to 1 out of 2. It's just playing a C. Add another note. Now those steps are muted, so that's why they weren't lighting up. Just change their conditions. We only have to do the first one and set the other ones to pre. So you can get really crazy using the trig conditions and do all sorts of crazy evolving patterns just with one bar, and it's a lot of fun. Cool. So that is the basics for sequencing. Now I'll just talk about the clip launcher. So the clip launcher is, you got your tracks, 16 tracks. You can go up and down with these 2 buttons. You can see right now all these patterns are selected, and this is the pattern we've been working on. If I want to copy that and like try it out on a guitar, I can hold down the step and paste, and it pastes the pattern that I was holding. Be careful when switching if trying to hit multiple ones at once, as you might end up actually copying stuff accidentally. That's an issue I probably have to address and maybe just disable that feature. I kind of like the feature, but I did definitely notice when jamming with this, and I was like, oh, I'll hit these 2 steps. Instead of triggering them, I copied one to the other. So maybe it's best just in the pattern view, like cut, copy, and paste works. So maybe we just stick to cut, copy, and paste to move things to avoid you accidentally copying stuff when you're just trying to play patterns. So yeah, so I don't have a way to stop tracks right now. You can mute them by holding shift and clicking the track, and you can see it's muted, meaning this pattern fires but no sound will be output. Yeah, I'm using shift for mute and also shift to select an entire row, so like triggering a scene in Ableton. So I don't know a good way right now of doing a stop feature. I don't think it's actually needed, because you can just use an empty row as a to stop. But or maybe I'll just always make this row a stop row. That could be, maybe I'll do something like that. But let's select this. We copied it from here. So you can see we got that same pattern going on. let's go through the song. So basically, if you hold Shift, press, it will select all these guys when I'm playing. To switch to a new pattern, you just select it, and it's going to come in on the next bar. You can see it's playing when it's flashing. And hold Shift. So if you've ever used like Ableton Live or Bitwig Studio, this is probably pretty familiar and not too complicated. But those are the basics of how to use Gridstep with the grid. As you can see, there's a UI here, which I don't think really needs an in-depth tutorial. Everything's pretty self-explanatory. But what is, I'll just quickly cover. So you got your scale page. You got a sound page right here. You can enable soft cut delay. And I'm routing my mic into the norns, so it's delaying my voice. But the delay is synced to the tempo. And if I change the tempo, you can see the delay time changes. Let's turn that off now so I don't drive you crazy. So yeah, sound page. Basically right now you can just tweak out the delay features. The clock page, you can set the clock source to be internal and also sync it to MIDI, Ableton Link, or Crow. I don't have Crow. I do have Ableton Link. I haven't tested that, but it should work. You can change the BPM right there. Then you got the track page. So if I change track, you can see the track changes. We got different settings for every track. You can also see in this top left that it always shows you which track you have selected and which pattern you have selected. And you can also see it always shows you the BPM right there. You can change the pattern right here with the knobs if you want. I don't see why you would do that because you got the grid, but it's there if you want. Useful though is changing the sound source. So if you want to use this to MIDI sequence your external gear, just change this to external, and then you want to set your MIDI channel. So you got 16 MIDI channels. You want to set your MIDI device. You have 4 MIDI devices on the norns. If you want to see what's going on, just go to your main norns menu, system, devices, MIDI, and you can see that number is what they are on. And I find that my devices tend to always use the same device numbers, which is quite useful. So just change that to whatever you want to send MIDI output to. You can also change bar length, bars, and the selected bar right here. Not very useful because you have the shift features to do so, but it's there if you want it. Trig page, if you always want that locked. Step time. This feature you'll find very useful. You can save and load projects. And you can also load projects as you're playing. pretty cool if you have a bunch of delays on. That's pretty cool if you have a bunch of songs and quickly want to sort of jam and switch between them on the fly. You can create an entirely new project. You can kill all notes and the credits. Now, right now I'm using the Timbre engine, so each track has a different sound. If you want to change that, just go to the parameters menu and you'll see you have all your timbre settings right here, and you can select each one of these. Just know sample 0 goes into track 1. That can sometimes screw you up. And also, what sound is being used is actually determined currently in the track settings, even though it's internal if you change MIDI channel. So this guy right here. That way, if you want to use the same sound but use multiple tracks to sequence it, to do some crazy stuff, you totally can. But yeah, that is all for Gridstep. Try it out. Let me know what you think. And let me know if there's any must-have features that you'd love to see in here. And let me know if there's any crazy show-stopping bugs you find. And I will try to address those. And have a great day.